Okay, so today we're going to talk about the productivity with OroCommerce from the developer's perspective. And let me introduce myself. My name is Marcin, and I'm a project lead and trainer in Oro for the last 5 years. I've had quite a lot of projects, and in most of those projects, we did a lot of customizations, and also we did some advisory for our partners. We had some talk with our community, and the productivity was a topic, quite a few discussions, because it's a big framework and it's not that very simple to be efficient using it. And today we're going to talk what we can do to improve it. Also with me, there is a Dima Krisev. Hello, Dima. Dima is the creator of the OroMakerBundle, which we're going to introduce to you today, and he will be here for your questions at the very end if you have any questions regarding to the Merkey bundle. Otherwise, we can have some open discussion if you have any other questions regarding to the topics we're going to cover today. And if you have any issues or, for example, the screen freeze or something, please let me know in the chat. So why productivity is important? The obvious business answer would be that better productivity is less time needed to implement some feature, so it's money. But from our perspective, it's also very important because if we feel like we progress faster, if we spend less time doing mundane things or the things that are very repetitive, we feel much better. The experience is much better. It's much more pleasant to work with the application or to develop it, to customize it further. So it's important for both sides of the equation. So for business and also for us to work productively. So, okay, let me just go with the presentation. So we're going to talk about 3 aspects of productivity. First, we're going to talk how we can use the tools that we already have to make them help us working more efficient and faster. And we're going to talk about the plugins for PHPStorm in this case. Then we're going to introduce new tool that we created and released very recently to make your kickstart in Oro much faster. And at the very end, we're going to talk about some hints, some things that you should do and definitely shouldn't do to make your work efficient and make the application work faster also. Okay, so let's start from plugins that you have for PHPStorm. And first, let's talk about why PHPStorm. Of course, you can use any IDE when you develop or customize applications. Oro. We recommend PHPStorm because we find it is very efficient, it's very reliable, and it has quite a lot of cool feature, and still there are plugins that can extend its functionality. And we're going to talk about the 2 plugins that are like crucial to work with Oro. One is Symfony, because as you know, Oro platform is based on Symfony. And the second one is specifically Oro plugin, which gives you the hints about the Oro functionalities and helps you use them faster. And sometimes, for example, when you are doing something for the first time, or you don't remember how some switch or option was called, it will just give you, some hint and list of possible options, which can help you find the right one without going to the documentation all the time. Okay, so how we can install it, and thankfully it's rather straightforward thing because both of those plugins are available out of the box in the PHPStorm plugin library. So all you have to do is to find it, install. If you didn't, it's like the first time you are trying to use it, then you need to enable, configure, and you are good to go. And actually, we are going to do it right now together. So let me open my IDE, and please just let me know if this is large enough, if you are able to read everything you see on the screen. It seems to be okay, but if you have any issues, please let me know. So this is the project, and right now this is just installed our commerce enterprise application. I create some empty bundle here. We're going to use it in a moment. Otherwise, there is no customization whatsoever. And to enable the plugins, Once you have them installed, you just need to type, for example, Symfony. We can start with this one. And here out of the box, it will be disabled. So all you have to do is to tick it and leave the app directory empty. Out of the box, as I remember, it says app. Just remove it, leave it empty, and that's it. You're good to go with the Symfony plugin. And the second one is Oro plugin, and exactly the same way. It's even easier, less configuration here. Just enable it and remove the value that you have here as a placeholder, and then click apply. You're good to go. But this is not everything, because once you have this, you have both plugins enabled, but to make them help you, to allow them to work efficiently with your code, they need to be aware about the libraries that you are using. And for this, you should allow PHPStorm to index few of the vendors' libraries. Of course, you can index all of them, but in this case, the PHPStorm index will be quite huge, and you don't need most of them usually. So here we can go to the directories, and here we have your directories of the application. And what you need to do is just to find the vendors here. And what I recommend is actually to index Oro directory. So you see, it looks like index, but actually if you click here, those will be usually excluded. So all you have to do is to mark them and de-exclude them by clicking the excluded again. And once you do this, you should repeat the same thing for the Symfony and for the Doctrine. Usually those three are enough. If you are working with some other vendors quite a lot, you should also index them to have hints and have the classes index, and you will have autocomplete for those also. Once you do this, you just click OK. And this is the moment when PHPStorm usually reindexed. This is why I did it before the presentation, because I didn't want to wait right now for the reindexation to be complete. And that's it. You're good to go. The last thing that can help you work faster is to exclude the var content from the indexing. So mark it as excluded. And usually you can do the same from the subdirectories of public. You don't need to index them. So those like the media or assets, whenever they are being rebuilt, you don't really need to start the reindexation. That's it. There is no more steps required to start working with PHPStorm with Oro efficiently. And let's test it. So as I told you, I created a sample bundle. As you can see right now, it's completely empty, and it's not even registered as I do not have bundles YAM yet. But it's okay, I don't need it, not at the moment. So first, the biggest hint of this Oro plugin is that it gives you auto-completion in the API, YAM files that are configuring the Oro. So there are quite a few those Oro-specific YAM files like API, data grids, search, system configuration, actions, workflows, a lot. And each of them have different options, different possibilities that you can use. And this is why you can really use PHPStorm plugin for Oro. So first of all, let's create one of those files. And this is very important not to make typos. So for example, if I call the file data grid, I will not have any hints because this is the wrong file name. So the file names are important, and not only for the plugin, they are also crucial for the application to work correctly, because otherwise they won't be loaded and discovered. So the correct name is data grid YAM. If I refactor it, I should be able to just start using it. Just a moment, let it be found, and there you go. So I start typing and I can click. In my case, it's Control Space. You may have different hotkeys, and here I go. So it will give me the hints what I can use in each level. Of course, I need to know some basics how this file should look like. For example, right now, I will not have hints because this is the moment, this is the level when I just need to specify the data grid name. So it could be like, for example, Tech Talk example grid. And once I go next level, I have the hints again. Okay, so I need like basic understanding of those files. But once I know what can go where, I have the correct hints. So for example, first, of course, would be like source. So I can go source, and then you can go, you see, you have all the possibilities, and they are dependent on the indentation. So here will be type, and for the type, I have ORM or search, for example. In most cases, it will be ORM. And then I can continue like query, type the query. Then if I finish the query, I can go back, and the hints are different. Okay, so the hints are really dependent on the level of the in the file where the cursor is. So I could continue with the columns, then it will be probably filters, and so on and so on, right? So as you can see, it works for the data grids. Yeah, I would say it's even more awesome for the API, which is also quite commonly customized. So I can create another file, call it API YAML, and this is the file being used to configure API in Oro. Again, it gives me a hint about the main option. Then I have entities or relations. If I go to the entity, now I should specify fully qualified class name of the entity that I'm customizing at the moment. And it's smart enough to give you hints about all the entities you have registered in the system. So if I, for example, want to customize user entity, I can start typing user, and then you go, I have few different entities containing this keyword, and you can see there's a fully qualified class name here. So I have the namespace, so I can go and then continue. So for example, if I would like to disable some field from the get action of the API for user, I would go with the actions. Then it would be type of the action. As you can see, I have the hints. I have all the possible actions that are available out of the box. So in this case, it will be get. And as I'm talking about the field, it will be fields, but also I can disable it out of the box. I can change order. I can add some documentation, and so on. In this case, it's fields. And it's even smart enough to know the fields of the entity that you are customizing. So I'm going to the user. So I have the fields of the user. So for example, I would like to disable the email lowercase. So this is the field name. And even if I would be wondering, like, what is the name of the switch I need to change? Is it disable or something? Here, I have quite a narrow selection that's obviously that I'm going to use exclude, and there you go. This is Boolean, so true. That's it. Okay, so if I forget about some switch, I forget how is it the flag is called, it will give me a hand and help me to autocomplete it. And another YAML file, which is rather huge out of the box, is workflow, and the plugin also helps you there. So if you go with the workflows, again, start with the workflows, then is the name of the workflow, so I need to know Tech Talk workflow. Then we already have some hints. So for example, I would like to build some transition definition. Okay, so in the transition definition, we specify the actions that are being executed when this transition is being done. So I have the transition definitions. I need to specify the transition, for example, Tech Talk transition. And then we have actions, for example. And actions is a huge list of actions available in the system out of the box. You can create your own, you can customize. So if you are doing this for the first time, you can really feel a little bit lost. And there you go. We have all the actions that you can use out of the box here. So for example, I would like to call some method. I will start typing call, and there you go. I have call method, which will be like the basic system method, or I can call service method, which will be method one of my registered services. So I can go call method. Oh, actually, it's just a typo. And then I can continue with the arguments I can pass to this method. So for example, the attribute or parameters. What is also very useful, I can go to the method definition. Okay, so if I'm not sure what parameters I can pass to this method or how it works, I can go to this method definition, check if this is what I'm searching for, use it, or otherwise I can search for some different method. And also it gives you possibility to go to the definition of the service in the DI. And here, as you can, as you already probably know, this is how you define that given service is a method. So if I would create a new method, it will also be in the hints for the auto-completion. And also this is why it's very important to index vendors for Oro and Symfony, because right now I could search in all my scope, for example, for all the services tagged with this tag and find all the possible action. There are also comments for this in the command line, but I know that some of us prefer to use search than commands that are prepared for this. Okay. So the same goes with the autocomplete for the action and condition in the operations. And this is one of my actually favorite perks of Oro, that you can build those operations very quickly. You just use the actions that already exist and kind of use them as a blocks. Okay, so I don't need to code anything extra. I can use those already existing services, just order them, pass the data from one to another, and add some additional functionalities to the entities. And then the still one of the biggest pros of this operation is that it's very simple to display this action later on the given entity view or data grid, for example. So it's exactly the same idea. So I create actions YAML, and I can start with the, oh, you see, typo. Sorry, guys. Actions. And I will go with the operations now. Demo operation, and here I will have, for example, entities if I want this to this for the specific entity, or data grids if I want this operation to be available for the specific data grids. Also, I can use for all data grid and then exclude the ones that I don't want this functionality to be enabled. Okay, so a very cool feature, and as you already probably know, you're gonna work quite a lot with those YAML files. You're gonna for sure gonna customize or add new data grids. You're gonna customize workflows, add some operation, modify search. So this plugin is really a huge help for you. What else it can do, and that we are not going to cover right now, is that you already seen. Go to the definition for action and conditions. I found this like very helpful every day. But also it will help you with the search YAML, with the navigation, dashboard, or system configuration. And believe me, in most of the projects, you will create one or few of those files. So this will help you quite a lot. Okay. Let me just check chat. I don't see any questions. Could you guys please just type hello there or anything so I can see that the chat is working and you are able to write? Okay, I can see it's not a chat, it's in the Q&A section, but it works. Okay, so let's use Q&A section. Thank you, guys. I can see right now that chat is disabled, so yep, let's use Q&A if you have any questions. All right, so now the cream of the presentation, the cherry on the cake. So OroMakerBundle. So this is something we just released recently, and its author Dima is with us today, and he's going to answer your questions later. So what is OroMakerBundle? Is something that's going to help you skip all these boring tasks like creating entities, migration, CRUDs, and so on, and do the only things that are maybe are challenging sometimes, but definitely more rewarding than this quite repetitive work. All right, so what is it for? It's created for you, as for the developers, to ease you starting with Oro or ease you creating new functionalities. Not completely. It's not a tool to create like ready to use or final code. It's a tool that will give you a very good scaffold for what you are building. And thanks to this, you are able to present your results much quicker to the clients. And this is something very good. Sometimes the clients really needs to see something how it works to be sure that this is the correct approach. Thanks to this, you can just configure the OroMaker, run it, and show it to the client if this is how he sees it, if you are on the same understanding. So this is when it really comes handy. And it generates the code that is rather very easy to read. And you can just easily customize it before you run this code or add this code to your project, okay? So it's not to replace you, it's to help you at the start, but then usually you will still need to customize or tweak it a little bit. So what can it do? It can generate the entities, and this includes the annotations that ships with Oro, so like config, import, export, auditable. And it can also add the relation also for those new custom entities like and the extended relations that goes in Oro to create relation between your new entity and the entities of Oro core. It will create CRUD controllers and views. And this is like, for me, a biggest help here, because this is really something that is usually the same. It doesn't change that much, okay? Then it will help you with the migration. The same thing, most of the migration that we create is like we copy the existing migration, we change the name of the table, we change the set of the fields, but the idea is always the same. Also, it will generate the YAML files for you, like API, data grid, search, and some actions. And also, it will create very basic import and export processors and so on, so definitions for them. Okay. How to install it? It will be out of the box in future releases of Oro 5.0 and so on. Right now, it's already available as an extension called OroMaker, excuse me. You can install it with the composer. Here you have the link to the documentation. The slides, of course, are going to be shared with you later on. And awesome thing is that it's going to work with the enterprise and community edition, so everyone can use it. And actually, we would love you to start using it right now. So, how to use it? It's very simple. All you need to do is to create a single YAML file where you're going to define the structure of the feature you are building, and we're going to do it right in a moment. In this file, you define the entities, field of those entities, some relation. Then optionally, you can add some additional options like so you're going to see that most of the functionalities are going to be enabled out of the box. So for example, it will create import export, it will enable the data audit, and you can turn it off using those additional switches. And once you have this file ready, you just run the command, and this command will create a separate bundle with the code for you. It is not here to update the bundle. So whenever you can test the generated code, run the platform update to see if the migrations went fine and everything. If you decide this is not yet what you wanted, or you want to add some additional field, you will need to rerun the maker command, but to first remove the existing directory, okay? So its responsibility is not to update the existing code. It's always going to generate the bundle, the whole new bundle for you. So let's use it. Let's assume we have a business need like this, okay? So one of our manager asked us to create a simple real estate management tool where we can gather some information about homes and sellers that are handling those homes. And then we should use existing customer user entity to represent buyers and products to represent the equipment of those homes, okay? Of course, we have some like bunch of acceptance criteria. We would have the provided list of fields that we needed in those entities, but the basic and the feature is just like this. Okay, so let's use it. First, we need to take the requirement and think what entities do we need. In this case, probably we will need the home entity and the seller entity, because this was mentioned. Also, it probably would be nice to have some view request entity. For example, somebody would like to see this property, this house. So we will need to CRUDs for home and the seller entities. some data grids. Also, of course, we will need some ACS protection and navigation to be able to navigate to those CRUDs. So let's get going. First, that is like the first of two required steps of this maker file, is to define the organization, the package. The package is real estate because this is what we are actually building, so real estate management. And organization, of course, it will be your organization name. Here we can go with Oro Tech Talk. So actually, let's code it. So let me remove those files. We don't need them anymore. No. And here in SRC, for example, I will create maker yarn. Okay. Yeah, we can add it to the repo later. And so we're gonna go with the generate, then these options. And the package. Okay. If you try to run the command right now, it won't work. What is always required for this to work is to specify at least one entity, and this entity must have at least one field. So let's try this. So we go to the entities. It's on this level here. Let's call it home. So this is like the name of the entity, and there we must specify the fields. So let's use just title. Of course, there will be more, but first let's try run it the simplest configuration possible. And each field must contain a type. We're going to talk about the possible types soon. Right now, that's it. Okay. So let's try to run it. Okay, that's it. Success. And we should see our bundle right now. And I'm gonna show you the files that were generated, but first let's run the platform update so it will be executed in the background. I'm gonna remove the cache because we created new bundle, so let's to help it out to discover. And let the platform update. Okay, so this is the bundle. As you can see, we have our organization name, and this is the package, so the bundle name. Let's start with the entities. We created one entity called home. As you can see, we have all those annotations already created. So it is entity, we have custom repository class, we have the table, and we have some Oro specific configuration like root name, root view, create and update. And the defaults used for for the forms, for the data grids, or for the data audits, right? So this is out of the box. And then we have the entity, we have the ID, and we have the title property created as a column and also with the config field annotation. Pretty straightforward, setter and getter for the title and just getter for the ID. Okay, so straightforward entity. The repository is empty. It's just created here so you can customize it further, or if you don't need it, just remove it. Please remember, this is just the scaffolding for your code. If you don't need something, it's better to remove it than just leave it or comment it out. We also have form types. So it's very simple form type. You just have the title because that's the only field we created. Let me check. Yep, the upgrade is running. And we have the also autocomplete type for the homes. So whenever we would like to create the relation to our home entity, we can display it as autocompletion, which means, and that's correct, that we already created the autocomplete service for this. So if you go to the services, we should have it form types. And here we have the search handler, autocomplete search handler for this entity. And it's created, we can use it right away. Then we also have controller, very basic, index action, view action, create, and update. There is no delete because delete is generated automatically if you configure entity with the annotations. Also, as you can see here, the entity is created extendable, so it extends the model, which is here. It's empty, but it means that you can extend the entities using extend extension or migration, or even via the UI. So dependency injection, very simple, just load the services from different containers. As you can see, those are really generated using atomic approach. So for example, if I don't need import export, I would remove the import export, or I would add a switch not to generate it, but they are really divided to separate files. So it's easier to find them and easier to remove them if I don't need it, for example. And then the same approach we took with the migrations. So as you can see right now, it just generates the table. So with the columns and with the primary key, you're gonna see once we're gonna extend the example that for all additional tables or relation or the foreign keys is gonna add additional tables. So it's gonna be very simple to find the code responsible for specific part of database and modify it. What we also got is a bunch of Oro-specific YAM files. So for example, API is already enabled. It's not customized at all. It's just enabled, as you can see. The bundle is registered. We have a data grid already, so it extends the entity we just created. It is protected with ACL. ACL comes from the controller. So in the controller, you will see that we have ACL annotation used. So this is the ID of the ACL. And these have like source, columns, sorted, filters, everything configured out of the box. Also, we have the navigation. Right now, we just have one entity, but you can see index is created for it, and also create, view, and update routes. And also, we have titles that are being used to generate titles in the navigation bar. We have routing because we have the controller, and also search is defined. So let's see how it works. Right now, yep, the application was already upgraded. We can run the consumer and see it work. So this is it. Let me refresh it. And there we go. We have new navigation menu here, and there is a name of the package and the homes. Now this index, there is nothing in data grid yet. As you can see, we have the import and export buttons already. We can create it. There's only one field, like old wooden house, for example. Save it, and that's it. So we can edit. It works. We have the change history, which means the data out is enabled. Right now, you can see the index also works, and we should be able to also search for it. Yep, there we go. Old wooden house. The type of entity is home. Also, we can see the views generated, and they're like typical. So this is also something that you would usually copy and modify. Here you don't have to. So this is the index. So we have the buttons for the import export, and we have the data grid. This is the search results if you want to customize it. The update, so there is also a form just with the title. And last but not least, there is a view. Very simple to add additional information here. It extends the basic Oro view as it's supposed to. All right, so this is like the very most basic configuration for this maker bundle. So you need at least one entity with at least one field, and you are good to go. Okay, but let's try to extend it. Close other tabs. I will not be writing all of this code because it will take quite a lot of time. I will just copy what I need from the file already created. So next, once we have the fields, we would usually go with the relations, but let me add some more fields to what we are trying to achieve here. So for example, it could look like this. The indentation is wrong. Okay, so now I'm good to go. So we will have home entity, and if I want, I can also change its label, for example, to the property. It makes sense. Then I have the feed list. I create title that you already seen. I can also make it required. It makes sense. And I will have address just of type text, so very simple address. I will have some photo, for example, the preview of the building, and the type is image in this case. I will have the description with the visvik and the date when this property is going to be available. Then we're going to have the seller entities because it was in our assessment criteria, and the seller will be a title, first name, last name, contact information. We can mark the guy as a private person, otherwise it will be treated as company, and some about. Okay, so you can see type is different. So here we have the HTML, here we have visvik. We're going to talk about it in a moment. And the last one, view request. So the one we added by ourselves, it's going to be very simple. We're just going to have the text and the contact person, which is string. Okay, so as you can see, it's very simple to add additional fields here. And once we get this, we can get some complex one. For example, relations. Oh, just find it. All right. We can use all the different type of relations we may need, and also enum files. So, for example, just change the screen here. Too many open tabs. Sorry, guys. Okay, so it would look like this. I can create a single relation to the existing entity, and in this case, I just need to type it like this. So this is the type of the field. Then I can also create a relation to the entity defined in the same file. So here I defined a seller. If I want to have the relation from the property or from the home to the seller, I can write it just like this. If this is not one-to-one relation, I can just add the parentheses there, square brackets, sorry, and it have it to many relation. In this case, I can define the relation type. It will be many to many, all right? So right now, I will have the exclusive seller relation between the home and the seller, and also I can have many to many relation between home and the seller. So exclusive seller and sold by. Then I can also create relation to the existing Oro entities, so the extended ones, for example. And so the buyers, the requirement was to represent buyers using customer user entity. So I have many to many relation to the customer user, and the same to the products. Okay, so the products that are related to this property. Okay, so let me add those to our Maker file. Just a second. All right, and there we go. So it could look like this. So what we added the relation to the description, and here we decided to use the landing page of the application. Of course, we could create new entity for this. This is just an example. Then this is something that we use really a lot in Oro, and we see some of our partners have issued to get started with it, which is enums. And we have kind of two types of enums. It's enum and multi-enum. Both of them are supported here out of the box. So I can create a field with the type enum and then just specify the values. And the maker will generate a fixture to add those values to the created enum file during the platform update. Then we have the date, you already seen it. Multi-enum is exactly the same. We just add the square brackets to the type. And those relations you already seen on the slides. So I have the relation to the seller, and this must be the name. If I want to use this, not the fully qualified class name, it means that this is referring to the entity created in the same maker run. So here, and this is the to-many relation. All right, so this would be it. If I just want to go with the fields and the relation, I could run the maker again, and it will create a new bundle for me. But we can still customize it a little bit further. So what would be the next and the last step? Sorry, this you've already seen. Oh, sorry. This one, sorry. So I can add some extra configuration. One you've already seen is I can modify the label of the entity, but what is very useful, and you're gonna use it as we are working with the management tool, we usually need to add some security layers. So ACL, for example. In Oro, it's based on the access level, so we can specify the owner of the entity, and based on this, add different access level to the roles. It goes the same here, so we just specify the configuration, we specify the owner. So for example, configuration owner user, or it can be customer user or organization. We can specify both owners, so the one that we use for the back office called owner, and the one that is used from the front store ACL, which is called front-end owner. So for example, view request is something that probably it's gonna be that there's going to be possibility to create a view request from the front store. So we should add also front store ACL owner. And the last one here is the is-related entity. As you can see, it's set to true for the view request, which means that this is entity that doesn't have its own CRUD, and it is managed by the owning side. Okay, so we can create the relation to the view request, and it's going to be handled there in the CRUD of the owning entity, but it will not have the CRUD generated on its own. Okay, so let's see the final file, and then we're going to run it. So it would look like this. Fields you've already seen. I've added the configuration where I specified the owner, and here I've added some additional validation, rather straightforward. And this is only basic validation that is covered right now. So for example, min and maximum length, this field is required, and so on. If you want to add additional validators, you can just add them to the validation.yam after the bundle is generated. And here, just for the demonstration purpose, I've added one more switch, which is owning side false, which means that it's not the seller that's going to be owning side of this relation, that is going to be user. And we're going to see the difference in the generated bundle just in a moment. Okay, so let's run it. And I'm not going to execute it right now and go the platform update again, because I would need to remove whatever is done. Instead, I create a separate container where I have this already generated. And there you go. As you see, there is more entities. We also have the view request and the seller entities. The idea is exactly the same. So what is important here, that as we specified front-end owners for the view request, we have this added to the annotations of the entity. So we have config. And in the ownership section, we have owner along with the front-end owner. So thanks to this, we can specify front store ACLs also for this entity. Migration is something that really changed. So first of all, we have data, and those are the fixtures for the created enums. So we created two enums. One was singular, one was multiple choice. And for both of them, there is a fixture created with the options that we specify in the maker configuration. Also, the migration grows a lot, but as you can see, it's divided to quite a multiple separate functions. So each create is separate, then we add the foreign keys, and then we add the relations. Thanks to this, if you need to remove something or modify something, you just find it by the name, and that's it. Okay, so it's still straightforward. We start by creating table, adding columns, then we add the relations and the foreign keys. Additionally, there is ACLCM generated, and this is because we had a entity that is marked as related entity. So there is no controller for this entity generator, so the ACL was not defined in the controller. Instead, it was generated in ACLCM. All right, so there we go. We also have some actions, and actions was generated because we have the relation to the different entities, and you're gonna see how it's being handled. So let's see it. There you go. Here I already have this generated and updated. I have CRUDs for properties and the sellers. We can start by creating a seller. Let's call him Mr. Caps Lock. Let's call this guy Mr. John Smith. And let's specify some contact form for him. Don't call it its fake one. And that's it. We had only one required field there, and we have it created. It had a relation to the contact, and thanks to this, we can attach the contact right now, and we have the action generated for this. So here I have the create or select component. I can select a contact, submit, it's added, and the grid here is refreshed. Let's see how this action looks like. So most of them is going to be fairly similar to each other. So for example, let's find the one with the contact. There you go. Seller contact attach. And as you can see, we assign the values and then we refresh the grid. So very, very basic operation, but you have it out of the box. And for each relation, it's going to be generated like this. All right. And now we don't have any homes yet. So let's try to create a home and try to create our first property. So if you go to the properties, we're going to create property and let's create a cabin in the woods. And we can select the description page. As you remember, it was a link to the landing page. So we can, we have quite non-related landing pages, but we can create one in the fly using the Visvik. Then we have the image loader, and here we have the enum. So this is when it was built. Then we have the date selection, since when the property is going to be available. We have the multi-enum, and this is this one. And we can select exclusive seller. So as you can see, there is no component here for the many-to-many relation. It's just for this one. Let's leave it for now. It's not required. Let's save it. And we are in the view page. So we have all the fields generated here, displayed, sorry, and we have a bunch of additional sections. So for each relation, there is a section generated and data grid with the information regarding this section. So here, again, we have the actions for the relations that were generated. So sold by, we can attach the buyer and attach the view request. We can, let's start from the attaching a seller, and we have the selection of the sellers that we already created one. So let's pick the John, and we have the data grid refreshed immediately. Okay, so I told you that we created one entity differently, so we can see the difference. So for the sellers, we have the contact and the moderated. As you can see, this is exactly the same definition, plus there is additional switch on the moderated by is owning side. Okay, and this means that if I go back to the seller, by the way, this should be linkable here, I have the attached contact. Okay, so this is the owning entity. So from here, I can attach contact, for example, submit, and I have the contact here. But I cannot select the user that is my moderator. Instead, it is created in the user view page. So if I go to the users, I go to John Doe, for example, and here I have attached seller, okay? So it was generated on the other side of the relation. Once I select it, submit. Also, as you can see, there is additional section, the users, and this is done using scroll data listener. So here we have the event listeners YAM generated, and we have 4 additional listeners. Let's open the one that we just see in work. So user view page listener. And this one actually adds a section with the grid of the relation data coming from the relation. Okay, so this is already handled. So whenever you create a relation to the existing Oro entity, the grid with this information will also be added to the view page of this other entity, which is very, very awesome. So here I have sellers, and if I go to the sellers, I also have the information about the moderators. Okay, search you've already seen work. So it's kind of it. Oh, no, sorry. There is also view request. We don't have CRUD for it, but it was created as a relation to the property. And here we have add a view request. It was, as you remember, very simple entity with just a text and a contact person. So for example, would be, hi, when of course it will come from the front store usually, but just to show you that I can do it. And here I have the CRUD also for this. Okay, so we had a kind of competition because Dima showed us when he was creating the bundle, he showed us the exact description of this feature, and we were about to post the estimate. And believe me or not, none of those estimates were lower than 2 days to create all these CRUDs and all these entities and management, protect with LCLs, add the import exports. It sounds easy. It is rather easy and repetitive, but still there is quite a lot of work to do if you want to do it old-fashioned way, let's call it. Okay, so let's continue. So what field type do we have out of the box? And to be honest, most of them. So we can go with all the simple types like integer, small int, big int, float, decimal, and so on. With the text types, including email, you've seen this one, both of those in work. So if you specify HTML, we're going to use the very simple tiny MCE as a visfig. And if you specify the type visfig, we're going to use Grape.js editor, which is very awesome. You have like the columns, blocks, so you can add your own stuff there. So it allows you build really complex websites. Date and then time, image, enums, and multi-enums, plus the relation. So usually you don't use any additional types in those. And there are some switches. You've seen few of them in work already, but there is more. So you can specify the default value for the field, label you already seen, the values you've seen required. You can specify minimum and maximum lengths for the text fields. In this case, it's going to be added in the validation. So actually, this is the one I haven't shown you. There is a validation YAM, and it was generated for those fields that were marked required and for those that had some validation on the length, right? So this was just required, and this has some length restrictions. Then we can disable data audit and disable import export. It's important. Remember, if you don't gonna use it, don't do it. So if you don't plan to, track the changes of the data in the entity, please disable data audit. And the same goes with the import export. It's awesome to have those buttons all the times, but if you don't need them, don't use them. and force showed on the grid, it forced the fields to be rendered on the grid. Straightforward. Then we also have the configuration switches for the entity, not for the fields. And so we can skip the CRUD generation. We can skip the API generation, well, just the configuration. We can skip the import-export completely. Then we can configure search set to false. Then it means that we don't need to search this entity in the back office, and we can disable data audit completely. So those were for the fields. I can make the field not importable, or the disable data audit for the field, and this is for the entity itself. I can see there is some question from Rafael. Is it not? And we're gonna take those questions like in 5 minutes, I think. So we have a few more hints for you guys, and then we're gonna have some questions and answer time. So that's it about the Maker bundle, and let's proceed to the last section. But first, please remember, the Maker bundle is made for you. It was really requested many times by our partners, by the trainees, by the community. So now we have the request to you. Please use it, and please give us some feedback. Maybe you have some feature requests, maybe you find some errors. Hopefully not, but always possible. So we are waiting for the feedback right now. It's ready to be used and ready to be stress tested. And the last part, some hints. So we know that there is a lot of functionalities, and some of them is really awesome, but still some of them must be used with the responsibility, like with this great power, and so on. So first of all, we have those extended fields and extended relations in Oro, and this is really powerful tool. And for sure, you're gonna use them in every project, but use them only if you need them. So if you are creating your custom entity, or even few like you've seen right now, it's better to create a normal doctrine fields, relation, and entities instead of creating extended ones, okay? So this is like rule of the thumb. If you can create entity on your own, the old-fashioned way, please do it. And then if you need to make a relation, or especially bidirectional relation to the core Oro entities, of course, use the extended relation. This is like a reliable tool and it works, but still the performance would be better if you just follow with doctrine fields and relations when you can. Important one, and this is not very widely known, is that you can modify the existing classes annotations using load class metadata event. For example, if there is a custom repository in the core entity and it was not created as a service, for example, you have the older version, you can change the class of this repository using this load class metadata to point to your new custom repository, which can extend the existing one. In this case, you can extend the repositories, for example. Next, the data grids, and this is also important. Data grids are very powerful, and they are like everywhere in our back office. This is like the very flexible way to present the data. Usually, when you extend it, all you need to do is to create a new datagrids.yaml file, create a configuration with using the same data grid name, and that's it. Those configurations will be merged automatically. So if you want to add some column or hide some column, you need to disable or enable filter, add some sorter action, and so on. Just add it in the data grid YAML to the existing data grid, and that's it. Only if you need to add some really custom logic, or you need to remove some fields and so on, not like hide but remove, you can add those events, and using those events, you can honestly do everything with the data grids. But still, the simpler and the faster solution is to create data grids YAML. So events are great, but use them only when you need them. Message queue. This is like, I'm smiling because in trainings many times we see that guys, you are changing something, customizing something, and you don't see the result. For example, you created new import export, run it, and nothing happens. It's because we have this idea that everything that you don't, or the user don't need immediately, should be put to the message queue to offload the application, right? So for example, data audit. You don't need to generate data audit information immediately after you modify the entity. It is definitely something that can go to the message queue. And thanks to this, user is not waiting for it to be done. Okay, so we just send the message and the user can continue while the system somewhere in the background handles this for you. Important thing. Thanks to this, the message queue can get a little, slower because nobody waits for it like all the time. But still, you need to care about the performance. It doesn't mean that the code that is executed by the message queue can be, spaghetti code without any care of the performance. It doesn't mean that. It just means that nobody is waiting for this like immediately. So it can be longer operation, but still you need to do your job properly. And then when you work with the message queue, it is critical that you remember that usually there will be more than one consumer for each queue. So there can be arrays, conditions, logs, and so on. So you need to take care of this by yourself. Activities. In most entities of Oro, you already have activities, some of them enabled. For example, if I go to customer user, there is more actions, like I can add attachment, note, email, event, and so on. Those are activities, and you can very simply add them to all other entities that you might need, even for your custom entities. So do not create relations by your own. You have extensions to the migration that you will do this for you, that handle it for you. And the same goes with the attachment. You should not create like a relation by yourself to the attachment entity. There is an attachment extension that will have the methods for you. Okay, so please use the tools that you have instead of trying to reinvent the wheel by yourself. And the last one, but very important, always use Xdebug. So Oro is a huge and complex application, and there is a bunch of requests being loaded asynchronously. Debugging them like old-fashioned way with writing some stop words or dying in different places. First of all, it's non-efficient, takes a long of time, and in many cases you write the stop word in the wrong way or in the wrong place where the code doesn't even visit during this runtime. Okay, so please use Xdebug, but also please remember to switch it off. Running Oro in development mode with Xdebug enabled really can frustrate you because it's going to be slow. And that's it, especially when you clear the cache or something like this. And the last, especially when we do work with the front store, you can enable layout debug in the system configuration. So it's only in the configuration mode, in the developers mode. In the production, you don't have it, but I'm in the developers mode right now. I can go to configuration, I can take debug, and there is development settings, and I can add debug information into HTML. When I save it, if I go to the front store of the application and inspect, I will have the information about the layout blocks here. Okay, so I have block ID and even the information which template is being rendered right here. Very useful if you need to customize something in the front store. Okay, guys, sorry I got a little longer than expected, but still we have some time for the questions. So, yep. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming, and let's see if you have any questions. Dima, I expect most of them will be for you about the Maker bundle, but let's see.
Yes, hello, and I see there are 6 questions. I have answered them already, and let me read the questions and answers. So the first question is about availability of Maker Bundle. At the moment, it's available for release 5.0 and will be available for 5.1. And the difference between these versions is you can see in further questions and answers that the version that supports 5.1 will also support the new bundleless code structure out of the box. So you can just pass additional bundleless option, and generated code will be placed in folders according to our bundleless structure. Okay, the second question is about autocompletion. No, autocompletion isn't in Oro plugin for PHPStorm. Isn't available for Maker YAML because it was just released and we haven't time to update our plugin for PHPStorm. Rafael also asked us about ability to add extended property with help of MakerBundle. As I understood, and no, the answer is you should use existing extend entities functionality and migrations, because MakerBundle is created just to generate new code and not for modifications of existing code. And at the moment, it generates the wall bundle and wall logic based on a configuration file. So answer to the question, is it possible to create different parts, for example, only controller or forms? Now it's impossible, but we are working on this direction, and in upcoming versions we will release such functionality, so you'll be able to define which parts you want to generate right now, and then will be generated separately. And I think that's all questions and answers to them.
Yeah, thank you
for
very
your
much,
time.
Dima.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. That's it. Again, thank you for coming. And you're gonna probably have a thank you email, and also there will be the recording. And what we need from you is to let us know. This is like the 5th Tech Talk, the last one this year, and it would be great to get some feedback. What do you expect from us? What would you like to see in the upcoming year? Would you like to see those Tech Talks about some specific topics, or shorter but more often? Really, we are here for you, and feedback from the community is something that is really helpful and really drives us. Okay, thank you very much. Have a good evening or good day, depending where you connected from. Bye-bye.